And she still remembers church. She said, I pray every day.
Welcome to Faith Family, United Church of Christ, studying Luke. What we've been doing is we've been going over Luke. We've been asking questions as we read along. We are currently in chapter 24. This is the last chapter. This could be the last day, depending on if we get through this all or not. I have plans to get through this. And then I will start compiling all of our notes and everything to make Faith Family's commentary on Luke. And that's contributed by you all to let us know what you think about certain questions that we bring to the Gospel of Luke. Okay, so let's go and get started. I want to remind everybody that today is Easter. Okay, she said Resurrection Sunday. That's one of the things that I wanted to bring up. Of course, you know that Easter is the name of a pagan religion, right? They celebrated the Easter, the early morning, because the rise of the sun in the spring, and the way the Christians did it was they converted people from pagan religions into Christianity, and they put holidays on their holidays, so we would celebrate the resurrection of Christ on Easter, and Easter would go away and Christianity would continue that way. So is that interesting?
Yes.
So the resurrection probably did happen in the springtime, but the days are in question. But let's go ahead and start. I know that some people from a more conservative background don't like to use the word Easter, and that's why I brought that up. They'll say Resurrection Sunday instead of Easter Sunday. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to try this again. We're going to let the computer read to us and go ahead and follow along.
Normal speed?
At normal speed.
24. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb. Taking the spices that they had prepared too, they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. 3. But when they went in, they did not find the body, for while they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. 5. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. 6. Remember how he told you, while he was still in Galilee. 7. That the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners, and be crucified, and on the third day rise again. 8. Then they remembered his words. 9. And returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. 10. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. 11. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. 12. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened.
All right.
Well, there's no 12 in my Bible.
There's no 12?
I have 12.
I have those from 11 to 13.
Interesting. I wonder what that is. If there's a...
Oh, it says, other ancient authorities add verse 12.
Yes. You can see it says it there. And a little footnote. Okay. So, what day is this?
Sunday, the day after the Sabbath.
What's it say right there?
The first day of the week.
The first day of the week is what? Sunday. Isn't that interesting?
I thought it was the last day of the week.
Exactly.
God rested after all the work.
Well, that's the Sabbath day, which the Sabbath day is actually Saturday, which actually starts at evening on Friday after the sunset. Because in the Bible, in the beginning, Genesis, it says there was evening and there was morning the first day. So the day starts when the sun goes down. Does that make sense?
So when the sun goes down at 5 o'clock, Sabbath starts at 5 o'clock.
Exactly. So that's why here at the congregation Beth Shalom, where we're doing our stuff, they do their Sabbath service on Friday evening
But it
after the
changes.
Sunday.
Yeah, the time changes with the sun.
Yes. Well, I think that, but I do believe they still it's 7 o'clock, which 7 o'clock in the summertime, depending on where you are in the world.
That's early.
Yeah, that's early. The sun might not be all the way down yet. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. So, what happened here? Using the phrase from the last word there. What had happened? It says on the first, it says they came to the tomb. Who's the they?
The women, because they weren't allowed to prepare his body on the Sabbath, so they had to wait until Sabbath ended.
Yes. So they weren't allowed to do work on the Sabbath, which was prepare his body. What they do is they wrap the body, or they pack the body in spices, kind of to mummify the body, and then they wrap it in linen cloth. And all they did before this was wrap it in linen cloth and put him in the tomb. Okay, so they come there, and what happens?
He's not there.
He's not there. The body's gone. It's starting to roll away. And they are, I like that word. They are.
Could you have more than one person in that tomb?
Yes, you could, but in that tomb,
Is it
no.
a private tomb?
No.
Well, it said in the last reading that it was a tomb that had never been used before.
Yeah, it was a tomb that's never been used for. Exactly. But we think of tombs, we think of like big rooms like this where
Mausoleum.
and it didn't need to be necessarily be that. It could have been just the size cut out in there, the size of putting a body. But this one looks to be a little bit better, a little bit bigger, because later on you're going to see where Peter steps in. So if he steps in, it's got to be bigger than that. And so they just make a little cave, and then they'd put a little shelf in there, cut out a little shelf, and that's where they'd lay the bodies. Does that make sense?
Then they would reuse it.
After the body had decomposed and everything, they could put other family members in there. They could go in there and make other places. Sometimes they would go in there and rearrange the bones and then put someone else on that.
Was there a religious person only that could touch the bones, or could anybody?
Actually, the religious people would be considered unclean to touch the bones. So that's to touch a dead body. So they probably wouldn't be part of that. Have special people designated to do that. So, okay. So, what did they find? An empty tomb.
Other than the fabric?
Yeah, this doesn't even say that, though. Is that it?
I thought somewhere it said it, but maybe I just read that into it.
But they went and they did not find the body while the stone had been rolled away, but they did not find the body.
Maybe another writer had that in there.
Maybe another gospel. That's something that we do is we know the story, so we take from this gospel and we put them together and we formulate, and that's fine because that's what we do, right? That's that idea of perspectives. If this person's writing from this perspective and this person's writing from this perspective, and to get both of them, now you have a different perspective that incorporates both of them. So, but in Luke right here, they just found an empty tomb. And then what happens? 2 men in dazzling clothes. 2 men. What does that mean?
Angels.
But it doesn't say angels here.
2 gay guys.
They look fabulous. So that's all it says. It says, and I think that the thought there is, like Cindy said, angels, right? When you see guys in dazzling white clothes, or it's got to be angels because they seem to know what's going So he tells them, the two men tell them what's going on, and so they go back and they tell who?
The 11.
The 11, and then all the rest. So there's not just the 11 that we know, the apostles, because you remember Judas is now gone. So we only have 11. So they go back and they tell them. And what do they sing? What do they say?
I think they're
But
delusional.
yeah, exactly.
They're women. They don't know what they're talking about.
Exactly. But these words seem to be an idle tale. Could you imagine that? I mean, everybody was there, maybe from a distance or whatever, but they saw what happened. And now these women are saying the body isn't there. And these two guys, they told us that he's risen. What's going on here? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Imagine what the women thought, and now, so what do we got to do? You know, you can't trust women, guys. Guys, you know, you can't trust women. You got to check it out for yourself. Almost sounds like that, doesn't it?
But I would have thought the same thing would have happened if two guys.
I think so too.
I got to see this.
I think so
just don't
too.
believe it.
Yeah. What are you talking about? You're like Cindy said, you're delusional, and not necessarily aimed at the women, but anybody that would come back with this tale. Okay, so that is what we have. We have an empty tomb, no body. Peter goes there and stooping and looking in. So he had to get down and look into the tomb. So, and all he sees is the linen cloth. So everything's gone, but the linen cloth, that's where we're at. And this is like Cindy said, this isn't in all the ancient manuscripts and the Greek manuscripts that they had. This verse might not have been in all of them. So, whatever it is. But the tomb was empty. No body. So what do we think about that? Well, we're going to talk about two other people now. These people are, what's his name? Cleopas, thank you. Cleopas. Okay, so let's listen to this.
13 Now on that same day 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. 14 And talking with each other about all these things that had happened. 15 While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. 16 But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. 17 And he said to them, What are you discussing with each other while you walk along? They stood still looking. Sad 18 Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days? 19 He asked them, What things? They replied, The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. 20 And how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. 21 But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. 22 Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning. 23 And when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. 24 Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him. 25 Then he said to them, Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. 26 Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory? 27 Then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. 28 As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. 29 But they urged him strongly, saying, Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over. So he went in to stay with them. 30 When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. 31 Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. 32 They said to each other, Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us? 33 That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. 34 They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." 35 Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread.
All right. And that's interesting. What day are we on now?
Monday.
Are we on Monday?
No, it could have been Sunday night.
It says on the same day. So we're still on Sunday.
Oh, that same day, yeah.
Happened on the same day. Notice that it says, while they were walking, Jesus himself came near, and he went with them. But then 16 says, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. I don't know. Some people want to say that that's because in the next story we're going to read, Jesus still has the wounds. And if this was Jesus and he's got the same body, remember he was beaten, he was scourged, had the crown of thorns placed upon his head, so he might have been disfigured. You know, you ever seen someone get beaten so bad you couldn't even recognize them? Maybe this was the reason. That's one of the reasons proposed about that.
Well, the Pope this past week went for a walk in the city without his papal guards on.
And
I mean, he was wheelchaired, but he didn't have his headset or headset, but people recognized him. But
you wonder about. There was a I can't. It's like a 2020 or something. One of those news shows where a guy was claiming to be a famous football player, and he had all these women, and they would lend him money, and he said, "Hey, I didn't have my money. Can I get some money from you? Oh, I want to do this. Can you get some money for this? I'll pay you back." And they're thinking he's this famous football player, because how many times do you? Well, not nowadays. Everybody takes off their helmet, and you see, you kind of know the. But this was back in the late 70s, early 80s when you just knew the football player. You knew the number, right? You knew him because of their number. And he was scamming all these people out of money because, oh, yeah, that's me. Anyway, so here we have this question, good question, Jackie, about why did they not recognize him? What did they expect from Jesus? It's in verse 21. But we had hoped he was the one to redeem Israel.
They wanted Israel restored and the Romans defeated.
Yeah, let's see what that says there.
They still wanted him to come back as a warrior, didn't they?
They did. And we see that later in later books, like the book of Revelation, how he's going to come back as this conquering. So there's still that idea, and I question that. So I always say that is figurative, or what's the other word? Figurative speech, or I can't think of the word. I always do this. This one word just escapes me. Cindy, what is it called when we're talking about something but meaning something else?
Metaphor?
Metaphor. Thank you.
What
A metaphor. So that this whole book of Revelation is a metaphor, and anyway, we'll get to that when we get to Revelation. So it says redeemed. What's the word here for redeemed? Maleo, which is interesting. Kind of like an apocalyptic onset there. Anyway, so redeem Israel. So like Cindy, want to say that again?
No, they wanted to Jerusalem restored, Israel restored to
Their glory days.
The Romans defeated.
And then here's where we get the idea from what the women saw in verse 23. And when they did not find the body, they came back and told us that they had seen a vision of angels. So, Joe, it wasn't two gay guys, it was actually angels. So, what do you think, Jackie? But they had seen a vision of angels.
That was interesting to think, if somebody you really care about, your mother or something, died, and then you go to where you're expecting their body to be, and they're not there, and someone tells you, "Oh, they're alive." What would you think? No, I've watched them die with my own eyes.
Exactly.
That's not something that happened. Because they love Jesus like a family member, so that they probably were offended that someone would try to pull something over on them.
Yeah, that's the first thing, I think, in one of the other Gospels. It says they stole his body. The women come back, they said they stole his body when they're talking to the angels. Okay, so the very first words in the next verse, verse 27, which is right here. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it as the women had said. So it wasn't just Peter that went to the tomb. He was just the first one to get there and look in. But some of the others went as well. If you read the Gospel of John, Peter and John go to the tomb. But John gets there first. But when Peter gets there, he goes in to look. So interesting how that works out. Okay, and just they did not see the body again. So what do we have here so far?
Eyewitness accounts that he wasn't there.
That he wasn't there. We still don't know. And this is the story from Cleopas and his companion about what had happened to them. And he's telling they're telling the story that they heard from the women and what had happened then. And we still don't realize that this is Jesus.
Did they actually think that somebody stole the body?
That's what it says in one of the other Gospels.
Okay.
So,
Was it common in those times to steal bodies?
well, what if they buried him with rings? What if they buried him with some jewelry? What if they done?
Well, I think too, like they knew that Jesus was controversial.
Yes.
And it's kind of like now, like when they killed Hitler. Everybody knows where he,
Yeah.
and Saddam Hussein, and they don't want these places to become
Look what they did with.
fanaticism kind of things, like with Muhammad and Mecca, and so they kind of, they kind of knew that. I think that they thought that's what had happened, that somebody had stolen the body to keep looters or seeker, just people like, clout chasers, whatever, away from him. They probably were wondering if one of the other disciples did it or who did it.
Yeah, who did it? So until he comes and now he talks to them, and it isn't until he does what? He breaks the bread. And remember, this is just a couple days ago that he did this. And that's when they realized who he was. Oh. So that's interesting.
When did he say, "Put your hand here where the nails were"?
That's a different gospel. So I think that's in Matthew.
Is that the same time frame though?
Same time frame.
Okay.
But that's what I wanted to point out to you. So far, we're still on Sunday. Okay? So when he breaks the bread, they wanted him to stay. Their eyes were opened and they recognized who he was. And then what happens?
He disappears.
He just vanishes. Okay? So right there. And he vanishes from their sight. Interesting, huh? What's that sound like to you?
He just wanted them to know.
Well, but what does that... Who was he? If he's here now and he just vanishes.
God.
We'll get there. Hold on. It's in the next story. If I'm here today and I'm talking to you, blah, 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 and I vanish, and you know that I died, but I'm here talking to you, and you're like,
a ghost.
thank you.
A ghost.
A ghost. He just vanished. He just had to come back, say what he had to say, and now he's gone. He's a ghost. Okay.
He served a purpose.
So, I think it's important on the very last words there. Then they had told what had happened to them on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of bread. Think about that metaphorically.
It's the same thing. That's how we know him. It's through his sacrifice and breaking of the bread.
Do we know him every Sunday?
Well, we do.
What do we do every Sunday? The communion, the breaking of bread. And we consider that his presence is with us. So that's kind of interesting how that kind of formulates into today's worship.
It's kind of interesting how they kind of went on. These two people went on a journey here. They were, they first started saying how these women went to the tomb and he wasn't there, and then some of us went there and we saw that he wasn't there, and then Jesus kind of admonishes them and talks about all the scriptures, and they're probably convicted, and now they don't know what to think, and then he breaks the bread, and all of a sudden they realize this is the purpose. So that's kind of like your week as you leave church and you have doubts and you are living in the world. It's kind of a real metaphor for our walk, because when we come here and we break the bread every week, we're reminded.
That's good. We're reminded,
Oh, that's why we do this.
That's why we do this. He taught us this. Okay. Let's move on. 36 here. And
36 While they were talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." 37 They were startled and terrified, and thought that they were seeing a ghost. 38 He said to them, "Why are you frightened? And why do doubts arise in your hearts?" 39 Look at my hands and my feet. See that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for a ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have. 40 And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. 41 While in their joy they were disbelieving and still wondering, he said to them, "Have you anything here to eat?" 42 They gave him a piece of broiled fish. 43 And he took it and ate in their presence. 44 Then he said to them, "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms must be fulfilled." 45 Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures. 46 And he said to them, "Thus it is written, that the Messiah is to suffer and to rise from the dead on the third day." 47 And that repentance and forgiveness of sins is to be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning from Jerusalem. 48 You are witnesses of these things. 49 And see, I am sending upon you what my Father promised, so stay here in the city until you have been clothed with power from on high.
all right. So, what time frame are we at now?
We don't really know.
So
Well-
what has transpired? These two guys saw the death of Jesus, heard the story of his resurrection, and they're probably heading home. And they run into this guy, this ghost, this Jesus, right?
The ghost ate.
What's that?
The ghost ate fish.
Yeah, here he does.
Yeah.
And so Cleopas and his companion probably turned around and went back to where the disciples were. And then they told them their story. And now, while they're discussing what does this mean, Jesus comes and he comes into that and to the group, and he discusses what. And what happens?
He tells them, I'm not an apparition or a ghost or...
Well, they're
something.
terrified, right? Because they
Yeah.
think he's a ghost.
But I'm not some figment of your imagination. I'm human, and my flesh has been
Yes.
destroyed.
And this is one of those scriptures where the conservatives say he was risen in body form. He was flesh and bone, because it says it right here. It wasn't just a ghost. So we have that. He wasn't just a spirit. And he ate in their presence. So if you eat something, you obviously are a human being, a person,
Right.
flesh and blood. The only other thing I wanted to point out is, where are they supposed to start the mission of telling everybody? It's in verse 47, right at the end. Proclaim
Jerusalem.
his name to all the nations, right? So we're supposed to tell this story to every nation. But they're supposed to begin in Jerusalem. And that's important when we get into the next book, Acts, because it's like they didn't want to continue. They wanted to stay there in Jerusalem and just be this little group of people that know this. Okay, real quick, the ascension of Jesus.
50 Then he led them out as far as Bethany, and, lifting up his hands, he blessed them. 51 While he was blessing them, he withdrew from them and was carried up into heaven. 52 And they worshipped him, and returned to Jerusalem with great joy. 53 And they were continually in the temple blessing God.
All right. So here's the first question: is how long has passed since then? It doesn't really say. So while everything that took place on the first day, and then they came back and they were discussing it, and now Jesus is going to be taken up into heaven. But we don't know how long this period is, according to Luke. Okay, he just says, and then. And then there's this question: carried up to heaven. Now we got this picture, and we've seen the picture where Jesus rises and he disappears into the clouds, and he goes to heaven. But now we think about that today.
Very kind of a theatrical.
Well, where did he go? Did he go and hide behind a cloud until everybody left? Or, not to be sacrilegious, but yeah, bye, goodbye. Do that with that trick with the dog where you hold the sheet up and you go, and then you dirt behind the wall or something, and the dog's like, is that what happened? No. It's just a way of them to say he left us, right? He this idea of him floating up until we can't see him anymore. Well, we know we can see pretty high, and then what's above that? Well, that's where the planes fly. Well, that's where the new astronauts went to in space. And then above space is more space and space and space. So today, I think we need to downplay this as just a way of them trying to explain what they saw. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If I try to explain, if I was back in Jesus' time and I tried to explain to you a helicopter,
They would think you were crazy.
or how about one of the magic tricks that you see all the time? We know it's a trick, a sleight of hand, a thing, but for us to try to explain it to someone back then, it's like, that's magic. This is what happened. So they're trying to explain it the best way they could. And so
John doesn't even talk about the ascension. He talks about he came there, feed my sheep.
mm-hmm.
He gives us a different perspective about Jesus showing himself to Mary Magdalene. And then he just said all the things Jesus did, we couldn't even contain them in written words. So how long he was back, or how long? I mean, the Catholic Church has set this thing that they say, oh, he ascended on this date, all that. But that we don't know for sure what how long he was here, but what else occurred, because there's not a lot of record about it. And they were just trying to figure out what he wanted them to do.
So, happy Resurrection Sunday.
All right.
He has risen. And we'll get into, we'll start right into Luke after this. Maybe not next week. We're going to,
Well, Luke.
I mean, Acts.
Oh,
Acts.
okay.
So that Acts is kind of like part 2, where Luke is the, here's the story of Jesus, and now we're going to get into Acts, and here's how the church is started, from Jerusalem to all the world. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very
La la.